Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss reports of a new poll which suggests that the Tories will be losing the most rural constituencies in England at the general election. Absolutely disastrous news for the Conservatives, but what makes it even worse is they're not just flipping to the Lib Dems, as you may expect, but to Labour as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So Survation have carried out a poll for the Country Land and Business Association, which as the name suggests, lobbies for rural businesses. The poll shows that support for the Conservatives in the most rural parts of England has collapsed, but's risen a lot for Labour. So much so that support for Labour now outstrips that of the Conservatives. Interestingly, this lobby group has a particular focus on policy areas of interest. According to The Independent, it's things like sustainable farming, affordable homes, rural crime and improving connections for rural areas. Now, straight away, if I were a Labour candidate in one of these areas, I would go, oh, well, Labour have got positive policies on affordable homes, dealing with rural crime and better transport links in rural areas. So this would give Labour candidates in those constituencies a firm handle onto which to build their campaigns. And it's way more damaging for the Tories to be losing these seats to Labour rather than the Lib Dems, because when the Tories have been in power for a while, of course they expect to lose a load of seats on the way out. And yes, some of them will be shock losses. They'll be, what you might think are safe seats and they'll flip. But once they've not been in power for a few years, and Labour have, some of the shock election losses tend to flip back as anger at the Conservatives abates. And if those seats flipped to the Lib Dems, it's arguably easier to flip them back for a couple of reasons. First, it doesn't take a great deal to flip a moderate Conservative voter between the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems. Second, the Lib Dems aren't going to bring huge benefits to the local area. They may well do a better job of representing the constituency than a disinterested Tory MP, but they'll have no more power to bring changes than a Conservative MP who sounds like they're up for the job. But when seats flip to Labour, that's more of a worry for them, because not only does it take a seismic shift in attitude to turn a Tory rural seat Labour, and therefore just as seismic one to flip it back, but that Labour MP will be able to personally claim that they've delivered when Labour in government. Like, Labour will want to retain those seats, so they will make sure that the tangible benefits are shouted from the rooftops in those constituencies. Obviously, Labour already had plans developed for rural areas before polls suggested they'd clean up in these parts of the country, but expect them to really go to town on plugging the new developments in those new Labour seats. Tricky for the Tories. After the election, assuming they decide at some point to stop bickering and taking elections more seriously, they're going to have to target types of voter, just as Labour have been doing in recent years. You can't target everyone. So it would be helpful to them if they can take for granted that certain types of lost voter will just naturally flip back, so that they can concentrate on the more stubborn ones. Well, if the Tories see a collapse in rural England, then you'd get the impression that it'll be hard for them to take very many voters for granted at all in the following election. Yet it's not possible. It's just not possible to target lots of types, because your offer becomes incoherent. You've got to focus your offer, and you've got to have a particular type of voter in mind. You'll have different groups all wanting different things, sometimes mutually exclusive things. And when you see an MRP poll, which shows results for Labour winning a ridiculous number of seats and the Conservatives, at best, on course for the same hiding Labour got last time, and at worst, being lucky to get more seats than the Lib Dems, it's not just down to Labour correctly identifying and targeting their key voters. It's also because the Tories morphed into their purest form. Because at its core, the Conservative Party has always existed to maintain the dominion of the wealthiest landowners. Got to bear in mind, when the Conservative Party first formed, very few people had the vote. Not many people got to vote, because that's what's conservative about them. That's what they seek to conserve, that power structure. But the party has had to adapt. It has to adapt to shifting sources of power. They adapted to universal suffrage. They appealed to enough people in enough constituencies to win power most of the time. But the current Tories didn't. I guess there was something about Brexit in conjunction with that very weird 2019 election result, which made them think they'd fundamentally reformed British politics, that they could focus all of their efforts into enriching the billionaire class. But they forgot that there aren't actually enough billionaires to deliver them even a single seat in a by-election, and not enough people who will blindly vote Conservative no matter what. Because essentially their appeal to these people in 2019 was, well, we're better than Labour. It's not, and they thought that would work for a good decade, but it's not now. And the current Tory anguish over the youth vote and housing is a classic case of this. Like, Conservatives are openly worried about how support in the young has collapsed for them. It's in the Telegraph and everything now. Now, they never had great support amongst the young, but it has monumentally collapsed now. And it's particular to this country. And they're quite open about blaming their failure to build enough affordable homes. They know that not building affordable homes for the young has been, to a great extent, responsible for this. They know that not building affordable homes is hurting them politically. So are they going to build affordable homes? No, because that goes against this desire to serve only the billionaire class. Even though they know this is going to be a major factor in not just this election, because they obviously can't make these affordable homes spring out the ground in time for this election, but they know it's going to hurt them in future elections. They just can't bring themselves to adopt a policy which would boost their political fortunes. And by the way, they haven't just cottoned onto this, but they knew this a few years ago. So they did have time to act before the election, at least to lay the groundwork for future elections. But they chose not to. It's like they'd rather lose the election than just do something for ordinary people that they despise so much. And this same disdain has, of course, hit other groups of voters as well. There are those who will still vote Conservative. Despite everything, of course they will. But ask yourself which groups are actually benefiting from the Conservatives. It is only the very, very wealthy. And I mean the very wealthy, hundreds of million at least. That is it. And those who do tend to think about politics at least a little bit are increasingly seeing that. And it's the same story in the rural areas. The Tories thought they could take votes there for granted. They slashed transport funding. Brexit has squeezed farming from both ends, input and output. You've got the difficulty in getting seasonal workers. You've got trade barriers to bringing in medicines and chemicals. You're finding enough vets, being able to sell to Europe. Fears of being able to even sell competitively in your own market with the cheaper, lower standard imports that are coming our way from the Brexit trade deals. And affordable housing is, of course, an issue everywhere. It's bitten the Tories on the arse twice. Not only has it caused a collapse of support amongst the young for the Conservatives because there's not enough affordable housing, but it has meant that largely Labour voting city workers have to now rent or buy in more traditionally Tory areas out of financial necessity and commute into the city. So instead of loading up voters in the city where Labour will win a few seats but by a very large margin, now they're spread out a bit more. They've flooded some Tory areas with the sort of people much more aligned with Labour. If the Tories had to pick just one thing of benefit to the country against their wishes that they should have done over the last 14 years, it would have been to build affordable homes. Had they just done that, then despite everything else, they would not be in anywhere near much of a mess as now. And they know that. They're not deluding themselves about it. And yet they still can't bring themselves to do it. They're just incapable. And so rather than actually doing something simple, which would at least improve their appeal for the future, they keep trying to work out how to distract the peons with culture wars, whilst a record number of Conservative MPs announce they're stepping down for the general election. Something which makes it even harder for the Conservatives to limit their losses. Not only are they losing recognised candidates and the premium that brings on election day, because there are a lot of people who will go, oh, I like that MP, I'll vote for them. They're not really voting for the party, they vote for them, they like them. That goes away when you've got a new candidate. But it also adds to the sense of a government which has given up even trying. So although it is newsworthy of discussion that Labour may well beat the Conservatives in the most rural parts of England, it does actually make sense. The Tories just forgot they were in a democracy. Presumably they expected democracy to be dissolved before Labour got themselves back in contention. After 2019, they openly thought they'd have a good 10 years now. So maybe that's what they were thinking. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.